As the Christmas decorations come down, it's time to start putting up all of that winter decor or transitioning the DIYs that I have already made for this season. I have several snowy winter DIYs for you guys today, and I know that you are going to love these projects. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. I'm Alicia, and I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Please give this video a thumbs up. That really helps my channel to grow. And let's kick off the new year with some new winter DIY projects. And I also have a little behind the scenes footage for you guys today. So let's get started. I like to use a lot of neutral colors in my winter DIYs and projects, so I picked 3 different ones in my Waverly chalk paints. I did the sandstone, snow white, and the plaster color. And I will be painting some books that I picked up from the thrift store. I like to find the hardback ones that they have. And I will be painting 4 of those. I'll actually be saving one of those books for another project a little bit later on. And I did some of these back in the fall, and I used them primarily as risers for fall and Christmas decor. And I love how vintage and antique these look. So to start with these, I painted the inside flaps of my books as well. I didn't do that before when I did these earlier last year. But if you leave these on a table or laying out closed somewhere like that, you can see just a little bit of the inside of that back and top cover. So be sure that you paint that if you want to do this project. And just to make it go a little bit quicker, I like to use my small little heat gun to help dry that paint. If you don't have a heat gun, you could absolutely use a hair dryer. That would just help you get finished with this project a little bit quicker. And I did have to do about 3 coats of paint on these books just because the colors were so bright and vibrant on these. It just takes a lot of paint to cover those up. And as I was painting the darker blue and the black one, I kind of liked the effect that I was getting on the inside of the front and back cover. So I decided just to kind of dry brush the snow white color on this book. I thought that it would give this a different kind of look and texture maybe than the other books that I am painting. This is the first time that I have tried this. I usually do complete coverage on these when I am doing my antiquing or vintage technique with these books. And I just went into my Cricut design space and found either a free snowflake file or one that I had already purchased, and I cut out a couple of different sizes and designs of those snowflakes. I wasn't sure exactly how many I needed, so I just cut out several of these so I can use however many I want and save them for another project. So I just weeded all of those out, and these pen tools are awesome for these small details. I will leave a link for those in the description box. And once I had all of my snowflakes weeded, I just used my paper transfer tape to apply them to one of the books. And I reuse this transfer tape if it's not got a lot of dirt or residue, paint residue, anything like that on it. I will just roll it back up on the roll that it comes on and reuse that until I feel like I need to throw it away. And then I just applied my snowflakes to areas where I thought they would look the best on the book. And this vinyl is Dollar Tree vinyl, and it works really well for projects like this. I have used the Cricut stencil vinyl before, and I didn't like it. It actually ruined a couple of my mats. The backing just stuck to one of the mats, and I couldn't get that off, and it didn't cut really well, so I just prefer to use the Dollar Tree vinyl for stencils and things like that. This one, it didn't want to stick very well on the spine of the book, so I just carefully peeled back that transfer paper and kind of had to hold some of that vinyl down with my fingers and just made sure to press it firmly to get it very well attached to my book, and just repeated that for however many snowflakes I wanted on this book. I did 3 on the front and 2 on the back. And moving on to my second book, I had some of this lace fabric in my stash. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cover half of the book, just do a small strip on the bottom or the top of the book. So I just decided to cut some small strips, and I will be putting that. Actually, it's going to look like it's on the bottom of the book while I'm putting everything on there, but it will be on the top once it's finished. So I just cut that down to some strips that I could work with. This wasn't long enough to wrap all the way around my book, so I had to cut a couple of strips. And to apply my lace, I just used some of my matte Mod Podge and just used a paintbrush to spread that out along the edge of my book. You could probably use Eileen's tacky glue as well. I think that would work just as good for this project. And I'm trying to get all of these books to look like they are a coordinating set, but also be able to be displayed individually and also transition into other seasons and be able to use them with all of my other decor. So I only put the snowflakes on one of these books, so that one will be the only one that I have to take down after winter time. Once I had all of my Mod Podge spread out, I just applied my lace to the area that I wanted to attach it to. And I did have to kind of hold it down there on the inside of the cover, and I did put some more Mod Podge down and smooth that out with the paintbrush just to get that lace to stick. Sometimes the lace fabric like that does not want to stick well to your Mod Podge. And I just pulled that as tight as I could and not pull that up from the inside flap, and went over the top of my lace with some more Mod Podge just to make sure that everything was stuck down well. And I just trimmed off that extra piece on the spine of my book. I just thought that would be a better place to kind of have the seam for these 2 pieces of lace. This is one of my favorite projects to do. I think I need a set for every room in my house of these antique books. I love reading, and we have a lot of books in our house, so I like to have different books and things like that as decor. And I just repeated everything on the back side of this book just to attach my second piece of lace. And I wanted to have a nicer finish, clean edge on that lace because I didn't get it cut perfectly straight. So I just grabbed some of this burlap ribbon that I have in my stash that I picked up from the Dollar Tree and just glued that along the bottom edge of my lace to give this a nice clean finish and a little bit of extra texture and decoration. So now that I have all of my books with whatever decorative elements I want to add to them, it's time to start the antiquing process. And to do that, I like to use my antique wax from Waverly and just one of these little foam pouncers. And I just dabbed off the excess and just went over the entire surface of these books, and I really paid close attention to where those snowflakes were and kind of just went up and down with my little foam pouncer so I wouldn't pull up any of that vinyl stencil and get the antique wax underneath my design. And I did that for the front, the back, and the spine of this book. And I didn't have any baby wipes when I was doing this project. I would definitely recommend that you use the baby wipes. I just used a damp paper towel and it did leave a little bit of the lint on my book, but I just went back in with a dry paper towel and removed any of the lint and kind of smoothed out the antique wax. And here's where I was holding my breath because I didn't know if this would actually work the way that I wanted it to. I was super happy with how this turned out. You can see how really good that looks when I'm pulling up this vinyl stencil. It actually turned out better than I was expecting. I haven't ever used a stencil with that antique wax, and I think this one turned out absolutely gorgeous. I think this one is my favorite of the three. Let me know what you guys think when I show you all of them finished. And I just took that antique wax and went over the front, the back, and the spine for this book as well. And I also wanted to show you to make sure that you go around the edges of your front and the back covers as well. And I did just a little bit of distressing on those pages as well to make all of these books look very antiqued and aged. And that is what the navy blue one looks like after I did all of the dry brushing. I did kind of heavier dry brushing in some areas, and I think this one actually kind of reminds me of a leather finish on the cover. So I just took my antique wax once again and just went over all of the areas of my book. And all of these actually had an emblem or letters or a design, something on the front cover and on the spines, so I paid close attention to those areas because I wanted those to stand out a little bit better. And here they are all finished and put together. Let me know what you guys think about these, but I absolutely love them. Cannot wait to get them out and displayed with all of my winter decor. I found these really cute Christmas village houses at my local thrift store, and I found two exactly alike, so I thought these would be perfect to make into bookends. So I had a warm day recently, and I was able to do some spray painting for some projects. So I took these outside and gave them 2 coats of my sweet almond colored Rust-Oleum 2x paint plus primer. I absolutely love this spray paint, and this is one of my favorite colors that they have. And this spray paint says you need to let these cure for 24 hours before you do anything else with them. So after I let those sit for the amount of time required, I just took some of my rub and buff in the color Antique Gold and one of my small paint brushes, and I went around all of the areas of these small little houses, and this just allowed all of that detail to pop on each of these. And I decided to keep these pretty neutral because I like to switch out a lot of my decor from season to season. So instead of making these look a lot like wintertime, I wanted to keep these pretty simple, so I would be able to switch these out. And I think these turned out absolutely gorgeous. I just love how that detail pops now with that rub and buff on there. Would you guys think about making some bookends with something like this? I would love to know in the comments. And these look perfect with the antique vintage books that I just did in my previous project. This project is super simple and very budget friendly. I picked up a couple of these, I think you call these hurricane vases from the Dollar Tree. They are both 9 inches tall, and I just used my heat gun to help me remove those stickers off of the bottom. And be careful if you do this, because I have burned my fingers a couple of times using that heat gun to remove stickers and things, so just remember that. And I used some Epsom salt and I poured it into one of my large measuring cups just to make it easier to get into the bottom of my vases. And I probably filled those about a fourth of the way full. And I had some of these larger pine cones, and I got these outside last year, I want to say. And I did put those in my oven just to make sure that I killed any of the bugs that you might bring in with pine cones. So if you collect your own, just look up how you want to bake those in the oven. It's been so long ago, I don't remember the actual temperature or the time. And I had just a couple of sprigs of greenery that I got on a pick from Walmart, I believe it was. And I also had some of these small pine cones that came in a bag from Hobby Lobby in the fall. So the little white things that you see there are pumpkins. And I also started to put those in there because from a distance you wouldn't know they were pumpkins. You might think those were snowballs, but I decided to leave those out. And I put those bigger pine cones in first, and I actually pulled those out to just get those smaller ones in. So on top of the Epsom salt, I did do just a layer of those smaller pine cones and then just put back in the big pine cone and that greenery piece. And just for something a little different for the new year, I wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of a behind the scenes look. So this is my crafting area in my kitchen on my island. That is where I do all of my projects primarily. I just use the craft paper that you can get from the Dollar Tree and roll that out across my island. Just set up my camera, and I use one of the little caddies that you can get from the Dollar Tree to put all of my tools in that I use the most, and that's just easy to move back and forth. And I have just an extension cord that I run over to the island to plug up my glue gun and my heat gun. And Zoe is usually hanging out with me in the kitchen or the dining room, and she is my assistant crafter. So I thought it was just a little bit of fun to show you guys kind of behind the scenes here at Lavender and Lace. Now let's get back to our project. So I just took a tablespoon to help me kind of gently put a little bit of that Epsom salt over the top of my large pine cone and just a little bit over the smaller ones. I wanted that to look like freshly fallen snow in these vases. And this is such a simple and easy project. You could get your kids to help you do this one, but I think this looks super high end and very elegant with your winter decor. And I have just some fairy lights, and I get these from Amazon. And once you start unraveling these, be careful that you don't get in too big of a hurry because you can knot those wires together and it's just a headache to try to get all of that untwisted and unknotted. And I used just one of my little silicone spatulas to help me get all of those lights where I wanted them in my vase. And I figured out which way I wanted to display this, which would be the front and which would be the back. And then I just used a small piece of Scotch tape to attach my fairy light string to the back of my vase so it would be easier to hide my little battery pack. And these are finished, and I just love this glow that you get from these fairy lights. These are going to be so pretty with all of my other decor. What do you guys think about this one? I love to use mason jars for my DIY projects. One reason is because I usually have a lot of these on hand. So I picked out 3 from my stash, and these were all different sizes. And I made sure to pick out ones that didn't have any pre-printed designs or anything like that on them. And I had a couple of those snowflakes left over from the book project earlier. So I just used some of those and put them on the jars and applied them as stickers. I opted not to use transfer paper for these, so I had to be very careful as I was removing that backing from this vinyl so I wouldn't tear my snowflake, because this is that Dollar Tree vinyl, so it's a little bit thinner. So I was careful while I was using these, and I just placed that larger one on my quart-sized mason jar, made sure to press that down firmly, and I started working from the center of that snowflake out just so that I could get that applied without any wrinkles. And I just repeated that process for my pint-sized jar, and I put the snowflake kind of down on the bottom edge of that jar. And I also had some stickers in my stash from the Dollar Tree and just applied that to my smallest mason jar. And I also just pulled out the centers of the O's and the zeros and the 8s and the 9s and applied those all the way around on that smallest jar. And I spray painted these with a couple of coats of white spray paint and just let those cure for 24 hours as well. And once they were dry, I brought those back in, and I just used some of my Cricut tools to help me carefully remove that vinyl. I just took my time with this process so I hopefully wouldn't scratch up any of that paint while I was using these Cricut tools. And that vinyl, like I mentioned, it's very thin, so it didn't pull off altogether in one piece. So I just kind of worked in sections all the way around my jar until I got all of that vinyl removed. And I love this snowflake design. I think that one is so pretty and detailed. And I just repeated that same process to move all of the vinyl and the stickers from my other 2 remaining mason jars. And I've made several sets of these, and I usually do 3 because, they say that everything looks better in groups of odd numbers. So I'm going to be grouping these together. And once I had all of that vinyl removed, I added some white rice to the bottom of each of these jars. That will just help my candle to stand up, and I will be using actual tea lights in these. You could totally use the battery operated ones if you wanted to. So I just filled those until I was happy with the amount that I had in the bottom of each jar, and just kind of shook those around until that rice was level. And I just added my tea lights, and these are ready to go. These give your decor such a warm and cozy glow. What do you guys think about these? So I was looking through all of my wood blanks, and I found this 2-pack that I had picked up last summer, I think, at Michael's. And these were on sale, so I got 2 of these for $5. And this was a perfect blank to do something with. I didn't have to stain it, didn't have to put anything together. So this one was ready to go, and these were a 10 by 10 square. So I just went into Cricut Design Space and put in the shape, the size of my square. And I also wanted to show you guys what I did to try to get my spacing right for the quote that I am using for this project. I just inserted 4 different rectangles and put that over the top of the original square. I thought that would help me just to get everything lined up a little bit better, so I wouldn't have any of my stencil kind of in the grooves where each of those planks is put together. So I just put those over the top of all of my text and aligned those, and I just sent those to the back to see if I had everything lined up correctly, and I had my fingers crossed the whole time I was doing this, hoping that it would work the way that I wanted it to. And then I just hid all of my shapes and everything and got my stencil cut out, and I am using that Dollar Tree vinyl once again. And to make your stencil, all you have to do is reverse weed your vinyl and just be careful with all of the centers of your letters, like your G's, your A's, your E's, anything like that. Sometimes it wants to pull up a little bit, and you just have to go back in and put those back where they need to go. And I had found this wintertime short poem or quote, whatever you want to call this, and I just thought it would be perfect to make into a sign. And just to apply my stencil to my wooden sign, I just used some transfer tape, put that over the entire top of my stencil. And this is just some of the clear transfer tape, and I get this from Expressions Vinyl. Just removed the backing from that and got it ready to go. And once again, with this vinyl, you want to be careful with any of those centers of your letters. I just pulled the backing off as carefully as possible, and if there were any spots that wanted to pull up, I just went back and with my fingernail or something just kind of rubbed and pressed that down so I wouldn't pull that up with the backing, because you don't want to pull out any of those centers of your letters. Then your design just won't look as neat and as good. Then you would just have to go back in and try to fix that somehow. And I just centered that onto all of the planks of my sign. I tried to look at the top, the bottom, and the left and the right hand sides of my stencil to make sure that I had that centered. And I like to use my hands first just to smooth out that vinyl and just go back in with my burnishing tool that I have from Cricut. And I really like this large one. This works really good for signs and larger projects like this. And I always have a hard time getting my vinyl to stick to any type of wood that has been stained, especially this Dollar Tree one. It just did not want to stick to that stained wood, so I just had to work very slowly and in small sections to make sure I wasn't pulling up any of my stencil. So that was just a bit of a process, but I was able to get that put down and nothing pulled up. And to keep my paint from bleeding when I apply it to my stencil, I like to go in with just a light coat of Mod Podge, and I used one of my little small foam pouncers that you can get from the Dollar Tree just to apply that to all the areas of my stencil. And I did use my little heat gun to help that dry a little bit quicker, and made sure to get around all of those letters so none of my paint would bleed through. And I used my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and just another one of my larger foam pouncers, and I just did one coat because that gave me really good coverage for this. I didn't want it to be completely covered. I like to have things that look a little bit rustic and worn. And I also used my heat gun to help me dry my paint, and it actually created kind of a happy little accident, I guess you would say. Some of this paint kind of crackled and gave me a very rustic finish to that, and I was really happy with that. When I was pulling off my stencil, I was really surprised at how well this paint did, and it looked really good. I'm glad that I put that coat of Mod Podge down. That just helped me to get really good clean lines and a nice finish to my poem or my quote here that I used. And I think I did a pretty good job with the spacing as well. It looks really good. And I just went back in with my little pen tool and removed all of the centers of my letters. And I wanted to try to show you guys the crackle kind of effect that I got with that paint on these letters. I don't know if you can see that too good on camera, but it looks really good in person. And just to finish off my sign, I did go back in with some of that plaster colored chalk paint and just did a little bit of distressing, dry brushing across the edges and all across each slat of my sign. And I put a little bit more in between each of the sections of those. It just made those have a lot more definition and detail. And I also did just some very light dry brushing across the entire surface of my sign, even across the letters that I had stenciled on. And just as a finishing touch, I wanted to add some of these snowflakes to the bottom of my sign. I got these at Dollar Tree, and they actually are that plaster color, so they match this perfectly. I just cut 3 different lengths of jute twine. I wanted these to hang at different levels. And I glued those on the back with some hot glue, and just to make sure that my jute twine would stay attached to my snowflake, I took one of these small half wooden beads and just glued that right on top of the jute twine. And then I just laid these out where I wanted them to go and glued those onto the back of my sign. And I just used some pieces from jumbo popsicle sticks that I had cut and kept in my stash. I like to have little things like that on hand just for such cases as this. That just helps me glue that jute twine on the back of the sign so these snowflakes would be attached. And that is it for this project. I love the way this one turns out. It gives me all of those cozy winter vibes. What do you guys think about this one? So that wraps up my first video for 2025, and I hope you enjoyed all of these wintry projects and you are feeling inspired to make some cozy winter decor for your home. If you enjoyed these projects, please give this video a thumbs up. And I would also love to connect with you on Facebook and Instagram. You can find the links to both of those in my description box. I'm looking forward to sharing all of the projects and ideas that I have for this year. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.